everyone. Hello. Wow. All I can say is wow. We are so honored to be here. You are an amazing spiritual community. So thank you. Thank you for this honor. Well, what would Mother's Day be without starting off with some quotable quotes about mothers? So here are what a few famous people have told us about mothers. This is from someone named Taneva Jordan. She said, "A mother is a person who, seeing there are only 4 pieces of pie for 5 people, promptly announces she never did care for pie." This is from Calvin Trillin, if you know him, famous writer. "The most remarkable thing about my mother is that for 30 years, she served the family nothing but leftovers. The original meal has never been found." "I want my children to have all the things I couldn't afford, then I want to move in with them." And from comedian Rita Rudner, "My mother buried 3 husbands, and 2 of them were only napping." And this one, contributed by my beloved husband, but this is from Jack Nicholson, who said, "My mother never got the irony of calling me a son of a bitch." Now, mothers give us some amazing gifts in addition to the gift of laughter. And the gift that I know I'm most grateful to my mother for is the gift of unconditional love. And hopefully all of you have had that experience, whether from a mother or somebody special in your life. And when you think about it, our mothers, by having carried us in their wombs, they gave us our first experience of oneness, didn't they? When we really were one. And that's what I want to talk about today in this talk about no boundaries. So I'm going to start with a story. It seems there was a young student who was walking down a country road, and he saw a farmer out plowing his field with a horse, and so he stopped to watch him. And as he watched, he saw that farmer look down at the ground, and then stop the horse, and then the farmer kneeled down, and he put his fingers down in the dirt. And then as the student watched, he saw the farmer stand up, and he had something in his hands. And it looked to the student like a large red stone, like a ruby. And so he watched, and that farmer, he dusted it off, and he held it up, and it was uncut, and it was unpolished, but by golly, it was a ruby. Well, the student was so excited, it took his breath away. It was amazing. And he jumped over the fence, he went over to the farmer, and he said, "I can't believe that you found this precious jewel right here in your own field." And the farmer looked at him, and he said, "Do you like it?" And the student said, "Like it? I love it. It's gorgeous." And the farmer gave him a kind and knowing look. And then he said, "Here, take it. It's yours." Well, he dropped it into the student's hand, and the student was so excited, he ran off down the road and yelled, "Thank you," over his shoulder, hurrying off, before the farmer changed his mind. And when he got home, he put that ruby on his night table under a lamp. And he sat and he looked at it really hard, as if he were trying to see something inside of it. In fact, that student stayed up all night long just looking at that ruby and staring and thinking. The next morning he got up and he took it off the night table, and he went back out to where the farmer was plowing his field once again. And he said to him, "Here." He said, "I don't want this ruby." He said, "I want what you have that allowed you to give it to me. I want what you have that allowed you to give it to me." I'd like to have that too, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what do you suppose it was that allowed that farmer to give away something so precious? kindness or generosity, compassion, temporary insanity. I think that farmer was coming from a whole different level of consciousness. I think he was coming from a place of oneness. So much so that he saw that student really as an extension of himself. Like it was, when he gave him the ruby, it was as if he was giving from self to self. Have you ever had an experience like that? Where you felt like you were giving a gift to somebody, and maybe you were so excited that you felt like you were giving it to yourself? Yeah, I used to feel that way with my kids when they were little. And it would be Christmas, and we had the gifts under the tree, and man, I was so excited for them to see what they were getting for Christmas. It was as if, might as well have been my dollhouse or my tricycle. Because I felt that I was kind of giving it to myself. The remarkable thing about the farmer is he felt that way with a perfect stranger. Can you imagine? Somebody he'd never even met before. He felt that sense of being a part of him. It was as if he was beholding and experiencing that shining, shimmering unity of all. And this, my friends, is what we mean when we use the term Christ consciousness. And if you don't like that term, unity consciousness or unitive consciousness. Pick your term. Every different spiritual path has a term for it. It's the Buddhic mind, it's Brahma, it's the Tao, it's the way, it's, even scientists call it quantum entanglement. It doesn't matter what you call it because the concept is the same. There's no separation. We're all connected. Is that right? You hear me? Yeah.
Roll with it.
Okay. All right. Anyway, the concept is the same, that we are all one. And this was the very essence of Jesus' message to us, which so often gets lost in what we hear from Christianity, right? Because he told us that we're one with God and we're one with one another. And that, to me, was the crux of the whole message. And he said that when we feel this sense of oneness with God and know that God is a part of us and we feel this oneness with one another, that we step into the kingdom of heaven. Not heaven out here someplace after we die, but heaven right here and now in our own consciousness, available to us at any time. And I like to think, that when Jesus talked about this, it wasn't like, oh, I can imagine what it would be like to be so-and-so, or I can put myself in those person's shoes, or something like, he wasn't pretending to be at one with somebody. I think that he felt what was going on with them in his own body. I think that when there was an injustice going on in their life, he felt it inside of him. So much so that that great compassion and love came up through him to bless them and everyone. And what's so amazing is we have that same capacity within us, even though sometimes we struggle a little bit to live up to that. So I'm reminded of the story of the young mother who was making pancakes one day for her two children, Kevin and Ryan. So she's making the pancakes, and the boys are starting to get kind of impatient. It's taking a while. Then they get to argue about who's going to get the first pancake. So the mother thinks to herself, aha, a teaching opportunity. So she says to her sons, Kevin and Ryan, she says, you know, if Jesus were here, he would say, let my brother have the first pancake. At which time, Kevin turns to his brother and says, okay, Ryan, you be Jesus. Kids. So, you know, it'd be so much easier, this thing is just really bothering me. It'd be so much easier if everyone else would change their consciousness. I think I'm just going to take this. I'm so sorry. There we go. There we go.
What's the problem?
It just keeps falling off my ear.
Oh, okay.
That's okay.
Maybe you have a piece of tape.
Talk amongst yourselves.
You are one with the microphone.
I'm one with the microphone. I love it.
You're so
All right. We are one. Can you tell?
Now you are.
Oh, good job.
Good. Oh, gosh. All right, so back to Kevin and Ryan. So the point is that it'd be so much easier if somebody else's consciousness would change, right? I mean, how often do you think, oh, if everybody else would just be a little different, my life would be so much easier. But the fact is, the only consciousness we can work on is our own. And it's only when we work on our own consciousness that we realize this oneness and we step into the kingdom of heaven. You know, the cool thing is that we don't have to create this oneness. It already exists. You know, Ken Wilber, he's a wonderful integral philosopher. And he says the ultimate metaphysical secret is that there are no boundaries anywhere in the universe. No boundaries. I mean, think about it, and I have the perfect prop right here. If you look at the Earth, there are really no boundaries. Boundaries, I mean, in terms of like countries and states and cities. I mean, we put all those there. We create them. So we take the whole and we divide it up. And we do the same thing with the sea of humanity, because we create labels and categories, and I'm this, and I'm not that, and all that. And it's kind of how we identify ourselves. Gives us something to hook our ego onto. But those same boundaries become battle lines. As soon as we start drawing those distinctions, a boundary can become a battle line. So let's take our lesson from nature on this, because if you look in nature, there aren't boundaries, but there are lines. And I love this example that Ken Wilber gives in his book, No Boundary. He says, for example, if you look at a shoreline, okay, so a place where the water and the land, well, you can think of it as kind of the dividing point between water and the land. It's a shoreline. So you can think of that line as a boundary. But you can also think of that line as a point of meeting. You can think of it as the place where the water meets the land. It's a point of convergence into something bigger. It creates together what we call a shoreline. And I have this similar experience in Kansas City where I live. I have the wonderful honor of serving on the Greater Kansas City Interfaith Council and representing unity on there. And sometimes when I go to those meetings, I sit around this big table and I see the Sikh and the Buddhist and the Hindu and the Jew and the Catholic and the Orthodox Christian and the pagan and the, I mean, you name it, they're all there. And I look around and, you know, that would be a place where I could feel very separate. I could feel very different. I'm the only unity person here. But instead, when I look around that table, oh my gosh, what I see are radiant beings, radiant souls, and this greater truth. There's really only one religion. We're all part of the family of humankind, and feel that as a point of convergence instead as a point of separation. So we have a choice in our lives anytime to see these lines or these differences as an opportunity to look for similarities or to focus on the differences. And as we do that, we begin to see these lines as just connecting points. So think of it almost like, you know, when you do a mosaic and there's like all the pieces fitting together, as you take a step back, you take a step back, take a step back, pretty soon you just see the whole picture. And all those lines just disappear. Pretty soon, you've got this. And I love what Jesus said in the Gospel of Thomas. You familiar with the Gospel of Thomas? One of the Gospels that didn't make it into the canonized Bible. And he's quoted as saying, when you make the two one, and when you make the inner as the outer, and the outer as the inner, and the above is the below, and when you make the male and the female into a single one, then you shall enter the kingdom. Wow, there it is, no boundary. I have to tell you guys that if anyone had told me like even 10 years ago, that I'd be standing up telling you what a cool guy Jesus was and what awesome things he had to say, my reaction would have been, oh, right, right. Because for so long in my life, I resisted organized religion. And I would actually, for a very long time, I'm ashamed to admit it now, but if somebody said Jesus, I would kind of flinch, just kind of flinch. Old patterns, old habits of what that meant. But then I found my way to unity, and I felt that I had come home. Maybe some of you have experienced this as well. A sense that I didn't know other people felt this way. I've come home. And as I've studied, the more I've realized that there's a beautiful message here, worth preserving. That we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. That if you look into the heart of what Jesus taught and what he beckoned us to follow, it was this message of oneness. It was knowing ourselves with the divinity within us and seeing that in all other people. And I believe this is the heart of the spiritual path, whether it's the Christian path or you name it. I've had enough exposure to other religions to see that all roads point to this same truth. So very well, how do we get there? Which is always the question we have. How do we rise up and live in this oneness consciousness? How do we feel that there's no boundary? Well, the answer is actually quite simple. One of the answers I think is simple. It's simple, but it's not easy. The gateway to this level of consciousness is tuning in to the present moment.
Amen.
Tuning in to the present moment. Be here now. Really be aware. It can change everything. So I had an experience along these lines several years ago. I was reading Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now. Fabulous book. And as I was reading, my daughter was about 13